Nestled on the outskirts of a quiet, windswept town, John Morrison's ranch sat at the edge of a vast, sprawling landscape. The ranch, though modest, was a testament to a life spent in harmony with nature. John, a man in his mid-50s, had worked the land his entire life. Widowed years ago, he had become somewhat of a recluse, choosing solitude over the bustling social scene of town. His closest companions were the horses and cattle he tended to with a devotion that mirrored his deep, quiet nature. His days followed a predictable rhythm: the crack of dawn, the chill of the morning air, and the steady work of caring for the animals. But everything changed one bitterly cold winter morning. As John sat at his kitchen table, sipping his coffee and gazing out the window at the snow-covered fields, a soft but unmistakable sound broke the morning stillness. At first, he dismissed it as nothing more than the wind, but the knocking persisted, growing louder and more urgent. When John finally opened the door, he was met with an unexpected sight that would change the course of his day and possibly his life forever. A pregnant horse, standing on his doorstep, looking as lost and desperate as he had ever seen any creature. John stood frozen for a moment, his hand still on the door handle, unsure if his eyes were deceiving him. There, on his front porch, stood a pregnant horse, her body trembling from the cold, her eyes wide and filled with an unsettling mixture of fear and desperation. The mare, a sleek chestnut with a white star on her forehead, looked out of place in the quiet morning, as though she had emerged from a dream or a nightmare. She was alone, no rider in sight, no one calling her. Just her, standing there, as if she had traveled from some distant land, seeking refuge in the only place she thought might offer her help. John's first instinct was confusion. He glanced around quickly, but there was no sign of anyone nearby, no farm trucks or neighbors in the distance. He wondered if she had wandered away from someone's ranch, or if something more sinister was at play. As his eyes met the horse's, he saw the panic in her gaze, and something inside him shifted. Without a second thought, he stepped aside and gently gestured for her to enter the warmth of his home. The mare's hooves clicked softly against the wood floors as she made her way into the barn, her movements sluggish but determined. John followed her, feeling an odd mixture of concern and curiosity. There was something about her presence, her quiet plea for help, that stirred something in him. This wasn't just a horse on his doorstep, it was a creature in need, and for reasons he couldn't yet comprehend, she had found her way to him. As the barn door creaked shut behind them, John took a deep breath. The weight of the moment settled over him. He wasn't sure what had just happened, but he knew one thing for certain: his day was no longer going to follow its usual path. Once John had settled the mare into the barn, he took a step back to assess the situation. The dim light filtering through the barn's high windows cast long shadows across the straw-covered floor. The horse stood in the far corner, her body tense, her breath coming in shallow, uneven gasps. Her coat, though once glossy, now appeared matted and dull, evidence of the harsh conditions she had endured. John could see the swelling of her belly, the unmistakable signs of pregnancy, but there was something that made him uneasy. Her movements were slow, labored. Every so often, she would shift uncomfortably, pawing at the straw beneath her hooves, as if searching for something she couldn't find. John could hear the faint sounds of soft whinnies escaping her throat, punctuated by heavy, ragged breaths. It was clear she was in distress, but the cause was not immediately obvious. His mind raced, trying to piece together the situation. He had worked with horses for years and had seen a fair share of difficult births, but this was different. The mare seemed too weak, too fragile. Her once proud stance was now slouched, and her eyes had a vacant, distant look that troubled John more than he cared to admit. Something was wrong, and he knew it. John paced the barn nervously, glancing back at the mare every few seconds. He knew he had to act fast, but he wasn't sure what was going on. He had never dealt with a horse in labor this far along, especially one in such poor condition. The mare's struggle seemed to be intensifying. He noticed a faint tremor ripple through her body, a sign that her labor had already begun. But the pace was slow, too slow. He couldn't take any chances. Reaching for his phone, he called Dr. Lisa Freeman, the local veterinarian who had been his trusted friend for years. His voice trembled as he explained the situation, trying to mask the growing panic in his chest. "Lisa," he said urgently, "I've got a mare here. She's pregnant, and she's in labor, but something's not right. She's struggling, and I don't think she can do this on her own. Can you come out here, quick?" Dr. Freeman's voice crackled through the phone, calm yet firm. "I'll be there as fast as I can, John. Keep her warm, and stay with her. You're going to have to help her through this." John hung up, his mind racing. The weight of the mare's suffering was heavy on his chest. He had no idea how she had ended up on his doorstep, but he was certain of one thing: he was going to do everything in his power to save her. The minutes stretched on like hours as John stood in the barn, watching the mare with a growing sense of urgency. The cold air seemed to bite through the walls, but it was nothing compared to the cold sweat gathering on the back of his neck. Lena, the mare, was now lying down, her body twitching as another contraction rippled through her. Her breathing had become more erratic, her muzzle covered in frosty mist from the effort. John couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in his gut. Something wasn't right. He checked his watch once more. Dr. Lisa Freeman was still at least 20 minutes away. His mind raced as he thought back to the advice he'd heard countless times from vets over the years. Keep the mare calm, make sure she's warm, give her space. But the truth was, John didn't have the expertise to know exactly what was happening. And the more he watched Lena struggle, the more he feared that time was running out. Finally, just as his panic was beginning to rise to the surface, the sound of an engine cut through the silence. Dr. Freeman's truck appeared in the barnyard, the headlights briefly illuminating the snow before the engine died, leaving only the soft hum of the wind and the distant sound of Lena's whimpers. The door to the truck slammed shut, and within moments, Dr. Freeman was by his side, her calm presence a welcome relief. She wasted no time, walking straight to the mare and gently running her hands over Lena's swollen belly. She knelt down, examining the situation closely, her experienced eyes quickly taking in the mare's condition. "All right, John," she said, her voice steady. "We've got this. Let's get her comfortable and ready for delivery. I'm going to need your help." Relief flooded John's chest, but his anxiety didn't subside. He knew this would be no easy task. Together, they would need to work quickly to ensure the safety of both the mare and her foal. As Dr. Freeman worked with practiced hands, guiding Lena through the difficult labor, John stood by, watching with a mix of awe and anxiety. The barn was filled with the sound of Lena's labored breathing, punctuated by the occasional soft whinny of distress. Dr. Freeman was calm, methodical, her focus on the mare as she gently encouraged the foal to make its way into the world. John could only stand and wait, his mind swirling with questions about the mare's journey here. Why had she shown up at his doorstep, and who had abandoned her? The foal's arrival was fraught with difficulty. Lena's body trembled with each contraction, but after a long, excruciating wait, the tiny form of the foal was finally born. Dr. Freeman immediately began rubbing the foal vigorously, working to stimulate its breathing. It was weak, barely moving, and John's heart sank as he watched. For a few moments, it seemed as though the foal might not make it. But then, a faint whinny escaped its throat, followed by the soft twitching of its legs. Slowly, the foal began to move, its small body struggling to rise. "Thank God," John muttered under his breath, feeling a sense of relief flood through him. But as Lena nuzzled her newborn foal, Dr. Freeman straightened up and sighed, looking at John with a grave expression. "John, this mare isn't just undernourished, she's been neglected for quite some time. There are signs of malnutrition, dehydration, and stress that go beyond just the pregnancy. This wasn't just a case of an overdue foal." Her voice was soft, but there was a firmness beneath it that John couldn't ignore. "I'm afraid this mare has been abandoned." John's stomach churned as the truth began to take shape. He knew this wasn't just an accident. There was a history here, one that Lena carried with her in every weary step. "Who would do this to her?" John asked, his voice low. "Leave her like this, alone and struggling?" Dr. Freeman's eyes narrowed as she began to piece together what had happened. "I don't know for sure, but I've seen horses like her before, wealthy families who buy them for status, then neglect them when they're no longer convenient. I've heard of the Vander Smiths. They moved a few weeks ago, and I haven't seen their horses since." She paused. This mare could be one of theirs. John felt a knot tighten in his chest. The Vander Smiths were a well-known family in the area, rich, influential, and, as Dr. Freeman suspected, careless with their animals. If Lena had once been their property, she had likely been left behind, discarded like an old possession when she no longer served their purpose. The mystery of how Lena had ended up on his doorstep was beginning to make sense, but the anger John felt only deepened. Someone had abandoned this beautiful creature to die alone, and she had found her way to him, of all places. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that Lena had found something in him that was worth the journey a second chance. As Lena gently nuzzled her newborn foal, John stood still, absorbing the gravity of the situation. The mystery of the mare's past hung in the air like a heavy fog, but one thing was clear now: Lena had been abandoned, and there was no going back. The cold anger that had simmered within him since Dr. Freeman's revelation began to churn, but it was quickly replaced by a profound sense of responsibility. This wasn't just a momentary dilemma, this was about making a choice that would change everything. John had always prided himself on being self-reliant, a man who kept to himself and solved his problems alone. He had never been one to reach out for help, especially when it came to his ranch. But standing in the barn, watching the mare's exhausted body recover and the foal's small form take its first wobbly steps, he realized something: they were not alone anymore. The thought of leaving Lena and her foal to fend for themselves was unbearable. He knew, deep down, that he could offer them more than just temporary shelter. He could offer them a home, a place where they would be cared for, where they would know peace. The thought of them wandering again, vulnerable and alone, made his decision final. "Dr. Freeman," John said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I'll keep them. They're staying here with me." Dr. Freeman looked up, her expression softening as she nodded. "I had a feeling you'd say that. You've got the heart for it, John. They're lucky to have you." John nodded, though a part of him still felt uncertain. But as he watched Lena nuzzle her foal, he knew this was right. They had found their way to him for a reason. And now, he was choosing to give them the chance they deserved, a chance at a new life. Word of Lena and her foal's miraculous arrival at John's ranch spread quickly throughout the small town. At first, it was the talk of the local cafe, with whispers and questions filling the air. How had the horse ended up there? Who was responsible for abandoning her? But as the story unfolded, a different narrative began to take shape, one not just about abandonment, but about redemption and second chances. John, the quiet rancher who had kept to himself for so long, suddenly found himself at the center of the town's attention. Neighbors who had barely spoken to him before now came by to offer help, whether it was fresh hay for the barn, a warm blanket for the foal, or simply a friendly visit to see how things were going. John, who had never sought the spotlight, found solace in the community's growing sense of camaraderie. The story of Lena and her foal became more than just a tale of a desperate mare knocking on a rancher's door. It became a symbol of compassion. People began to reflect on their own responsibilities, not just to animals, but to one another. Slowly but surely, the town, inspired by John's act of kindness, began to shift. They realized that sometimes it only takes one person to make a difference, to turn a life around, and John had shown them how. As the months passed, Lena and her foal, now named Hope, settled into their new life at the ranch. The once fragile mare had regained her strength under John's care, her coat gleaming in the sunlight, her body robust and full of life. Hope, too, had blossomed. Her legs, once shaky, now carried her across the fields with youthful energy. The two of them, inseparable, seemed to embody the very essence of second chances. John, too, had changed. The ranch that had once felt like a place of solitude now brimmed with life, both human and animal. The bond he shared with Lena and Hope was unlike any he had known before. Every morning, as he watched them graze in the fields, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment that had eluded him for years. He had given them a new beginning, but in doing so, they had given him something invaluable in return: companionship and a renewed purpose. The town had also changed in small but profound ways. People who had once kept to themselves now reached out, offering support and kindness. John's act of compassion had sparked a ripple effect, inspiring others to be more mindful of the animals and people in their lives. Lena and Hope had not only healed a rancher's heart but had brought a community closer together, reminding everyone that sometimes the smallest gestures can have the largest impact. As John stood on his porch one evening, watching Lena and Hope run freely in the setting sun, he realized that life, like the seasons, had a way of bringing things full circle. In answering the knock on his door, he had found something he never knew he needed: a family.